Angela Carter had spent the entire day working on a tough case. As an FBI agent, she was used to long hours and high-pressure situations. But today, she had finally taken a short break for herself. She had stepped into a luxury clothing store, bought a beautiful dress for an upcoming event, and was now walking back to her car, feeling a rare moment of peace. Across the street, Officer Bradley Turner sat in his patrol car, watching. He had been a cop for years, and he believed he could always spot trouble. When he saw Angela walk out of the store with a shopping bag, something about her confidence bothered him. He convinced himself that she had stolen something. Maybe it was the way she walked, or maybe he just didn't like the idea of someone like her carrying expensive things. He didn't stop to think twice. He just acted. Angela had just reached her car when she heard a sharp voice behind her. "Hey, stop right there." She turned around and saw the officer marching toward her, hand on his belt. She sighed. She had dealt with these situations before, but not quite like this. "Yes, officer," she asked, keeping her voice calm. Turner narrowed his eyes. "I need to see your receipt and ID. Where did you get that bag?" Angela frowned, surprised by the direct accusation. "I bought it in that store." "Why?" Turner didn't answer. Instead, he stepped closer, eyeing her with suspicion. "Just show me your receipt and ID." Now, Angela could feel the eyes of other people on the street watching them. Some had even stopped to see what was going on. She didn't want a scene, but she also knew she had done nothing wrong. Still, she didn't argue. She reached into her purse, intending to pull out her FBI badge along with her ID. Big mistake. Turner saw her reaching inside her bag and reacted instantly. Without waiting, he grabbed her wrist and spun her around, pushing her against the car. The shopping bag fell to the ground, and the receipt floated onto the pavement. A few people gasped. Someone took out their phone and started recording. "Hey, what are you doing?" Angela protested, struggling to stay calm. "Hands behind your back." Turner barked. "You're under arrest for theft and resisting an officer." Angela's heart pounded, but not from fear. She was in shock. She couldn't believe what was happening. She could hear people around them murmuring. A woman's voice rang out. "She didn't do anything. I saw her pay for that." Turner ignored everyone. He was too focused on what he thought was a criminal in his hands. As he locked the cuffs around Angela's wrists, she took a deep breath. She knew something he didn't. This was going to be the biggest mistake of his career. The moment the handcuffs clicked around Angela's wrists, murmurs turned into loud voices. People gathered, watching in shock as the officer forced her toward his patrol car. Some shouted in protest. Others pulled out their phones, recording everything. Angela could see the concerned faces around her, but she stayed calm. She had been in high-pressure situations before. She knew that losing her temper wouldn't help. "Officer, you need to listen to me," she said firmly, keeping her voice steady. "I am a federal agent. Let me show you my badge." Turner let out a short, mocking laugh. "Yeah, right," he scoffed. "That's what they all say." Angela took a deep breath. He wasn't listening. He didn't want to. In his mind, he had already decided she was guilty. A man stepped forward from the crowd. "Officer, I saw everything. She paid for that. You're making a mistake." Turner shot the man a sharp look. "Step back," he warned, pointing a finger at him. "This doesn't concern you." The man frowned but didn't move. More people joined in, their voices rising in protest. "Let her go," one woman shouted. "She didn't do anything wrong." Angela felt the tension in the air. The crowd was growing angry, and Turner could feel it too. His grip on her arm tightened as he pushed her toward the patrol car. "This is police business," he snapped. "Mind your own." Angela could hear the clicks of cameras and the buzz of notifications. People were already posting the video online. She knew how fast these things spread. Within minutes, the world would see what was happening. As Turner opened the car door, Angela turned her head slightly. "You're making a huge mistake," she said calmly. Turner ignored her. He was too focused on proving his authority. He guided her into the back seat and slammed the door shut. Then, without another word, he walked to the front and radioed in, reporting that he had just arrested a shoplifting suspect. Angela sat in the back of the car, her hands still cuffed behind her. She could see people outside, still recording, still talking. A young woman pressed her phone to her ear, making a call. Angela had a feeling she knew what was coming next. It didn't take long. Less than 10 minutes later, a second patrol car pulled up. Then another. Then a black SUV with tinted windows. The crowd gasped as two men in dark suits stepped out of the SUV, moving quickly toward the first patrol car. Turner, who had been standing outside, crossed his arms and smirked. "About time backup showed up," he muttered. The men didn't even glance at him. They walked straight to the back of the car and opened the door. One of them leaned down, looking at Angela with concern. "Agent Carter, are you all right?" he asked. Angela nodded. "I'm fine," she said smoothly, even though the metal cuffs were biting into her wrists. Turner's smirk faded. "Wait, what?" he muttered, frowning. He took a step closer, confused. The second man, a senior FBI official, turned to him. "You just arrested a federal agent," he said, his voice ice-cold. Silence. Turner's face went pale. He looked at Angela, then back at the agents. She said she was FBI. "But I thought." "You thought wrong," the agent cut in sharply. "And now you're in serious trouble." The crowd, still watching, erupted into cheers. The young woman who had made the call grinned. "Told you she wasn't just anybody," she whispered to a friend. Angela slowly stepped out of the car as one of the agents unlocked her cuffs. She rubbed her wrists and looked at Turner. He looked stunned, completely frozen. He had no words. Angela smiled slightly. This was only the beginning. Turner stood there, frozen, his face pale as the weight of his mistake hit him. His confident smirk had vanished. Just moments ago, he had been so sure of himself, believing he had caught a criminal. But now, standing in front of him were high-ranking FBI officials, their sharp eyes locked on him with disappointment and anger. The crowd watched in silence, waiting to see what would happen next. Angela Carter slowly rubbed her wrists after the handcuffs were removed. The red marks left on her skin didn't hurt as much as the situation itself. She had faced difficult moments before in her career, but being wrongly arrested, humiliated in front of strangers, and treated like a suspect was something different. Still, she kept her emotions in check. She had dealt with people like Turner before. One of the FBI agents, a man named Agent Reynolds, stepped forward. His deep voice was calm but carried authority. "Officer Turner, do you realize what you've done?" he asked, his piercing gaze fixed on the nervous officer. Turner cleared his throat, struggling to find the right words. I was just doing my job," he muttered. Reynolds raised an eyebrow. "Your job," he repeated. "Your job is to protect and serve, not to profile innocent citizens, especially an FBI agent." The crowd whispered among themselves, some shaking their heads. Turner looked around, realizing that every single person there had seen everything. The phones were still recording. His mistake was already out in the world for millions to see. Angela took a step closer, her voice calm but firm. "Officer Turner," she said, looking directly at him, "I told you who I was. I gave you a chance to listen. But you ignored me, assumed I was a criminal, and arrested me without any proof." Turner opened his mouth as if to argue, but then shut it again. What could he say? There was no excuse. The police captain arrived moments later, his face tight with frustration. He had already seen the video circulating online. He knew this was bad, really bad. With so many eyes watching, there was no way to cover it up. "Turner," the captain said, his voice low and serious, "go back to the station. Now." Turner hesitated. "But now, His shoulders slumped as he finally realized the situation was out of his control. Without another word, he walked to his car, avoiding the stares of the crowd. As he drove away, Angela could see the embarrassment on his face. The crowd began clapping. Some people cheered for Angela, others simply shook their heads in disbelief. The woman who had made the call earlier stepped forward, smiling. "We got it all on video," she said. "People need to see this." Angela nodded. "Thank you," she said sincerely. She wasn't happy about what had happened, but she knew that moments like these had to be exposed. If she had been an ordinary citizen without an FBI badge, who knows how differently things would have ended. Agent Reynolds turned to Angela. "You okay?" She nodded again. "I'm fine," she said, though a part of her was still processing everything. The captain turned toward her, his expression apologetic. "Agent Carter, I deeply regret what happened today," he said. "This should never have happened." Angela studied him for a moment before speaking. "You're right. It shouldn't have." The captain sighed. "We'll handle Turner." Angela crossed her arms. "You don't just have a Turner problem. You have a system problem." The captain didn't respond, but his silence spoke volumes. He knew she was right. Angela looked at the remaining officers, the crowd, and the FBI agents standing beside her. She had a choice to make: walk away and forget this ever happened, or take action to make sure it never happened to anyone else. She already knew her answer. Angela sat in her office late that night, staring at the screen in front of her. The video of her arrest had spread like wildfire. News channels were playing it on repeat. Social media was flooded with comments, some in outrage, others in disbelief. People were demanding answers. Some called for Turner to be fired immediately. Others questioned how many more cases like this had happened, but were never caught on camera. Angela took a deep breath. This wasn't just about her. If she had been treated this way despite being an FBI agent, what about the people who didn't have a badge to protect them? How many innocent people had been arrested, mistreated, or even worse, just because someone like Turner assumed they were guilty? She wasn't going to let this go. Instead of getting angry, Angela did what she did best. She investigated. She pulled up Turner's records, searching through every complaint, every case, every report. What she found was disturbing. Turner had been accused of wrongful arrests before. At least 10 people had filed complaints against him over the past 5 years, all saying the same thing. He targeted innocent people without evidence. Some had even claimed he used unnecessary force. But every single complaint had been dismissed. No action had ever been taken against him. Angela frowned. How was that possible? She dug deeper. The pattern was clear. Turner had friends in the department who protected him. Anytime someone filed a complaint, it was quietly erased. His mistakes were covered up. The system wasn't just failing, it was protecting the wrong people. Angela leaned back in her chair, thinking. If this had happened so many times before, it wasn't just Turner's fault. It was the fault of every person who had allowed him to continue without consequences. She picked up her phone and made a call. "Reynolds, I need a meeting with Internal Affairs first thing tomorrow morning," she said. There was a pause. Then Reynolds spoke. "You're not letting this go, are you?" "No," she said firmly. "I'm not." The next morning, Angela walked into the Internal Affairs office with a file in her hands. She placed it on the desk of the lead investigator. "This is everything I found on Officer Turner," she said, "but he's not the only problem. I need to know how he got away with this for so long." The investigator, a serious-looking man in his 50s, glanced at the file. "You're asking us to go after one of our own. I'm asking you to do your job," Angela corrected him. "And if you don't, I'll take this to the public." The man studied her for a moment, then sighed and opened the file. As he read, his expression changed from neutral to concerned. Finally, he nodded. "We'll look into it." But Angela wasn't going to wait. She met with community leaders, lawyers, and even a few journalists. She wanted people to know the truth. She wanted real change, not just an apology and a promise to review policies. A few days later, the police department announced that Officer Turner was suspended while an investigation was underway. But Angela knew that wasn't enough. Turner was just one officer. The real problem was bigger than him. She wasn't stopping until the system itself was forced to change. Days passed, but the fires surrounding the case did not die down. If anything, it grew stronger. Angela's arrest had started a conversation across the country. People were sharing their own experiences, telling stories of how they had been wrongly accused or treated unfairly. News channels kept reporting on Officer Turner's suspension, and more people were demanding justice. Angela watched everything unfold, but she knew one thing: talking was not enough. Real change only happened when action was taken, and she wasn't going to stop until that happened. One morning, as she was reviewing more files, her phone rang. It was Agent Reynolds. "You need to see this," he said. "Meet me at the office." Angela wasted no time. She grabbed her bag and drove straight to the FBI headquarters. When she arrived, Reynolds was already waiting for her, holding a thick folder in his hands. His expression was serious. "We got access to more records," he said, handing her the folder. "And you were right. Turner was protected." Angela opened the file and scanned the papers inside. What she saw made her stomach turn. Not only had Turner been protected, yet still kept their jobs. Some had even been promoted. It was worse than she thought. "This isn't just about one bad cop," Angela said, shaking her head. "This is a system that hides the truth." Reynolds nodded. "And it's been going on for years." Angela clenched her jaw. She had suspected as much, but now she had proof. And with proof came responsibility. She knew that if she didn't act, things would stay the same. She had to do something bigger. That evening, she reached out to a well-known civil rights lawyer, Mr. Daniels. He had spent years fighting cases like this, exposing corruption and holding the right people accountable. When Angela explained everything to him, he listened carefully. "This is big," he finally said. "If we take this public, it won't just be about Turner. It will expose an entire system." "That's exactly what I want," Angela said firmly. "I don't just want Turner to be punished. I want real change." Daniels nodded. "Then we'll have to do this the right way. No shortcuts. We'll gather more evidence, talk to victims, and build a strong case." Angela agreed. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. And justice needed patience. Over the next few weeks, she and Daniels worked together. They spoke to people who had filed complaints against Turner and other officers. Some were afraid to talk, but when they saw Angela's case gaining attention, they found the courage to speak out. Meanwhile, the police department was feeling the pressure. The video of Angela's wrongful arrest had been seen by millions, and the mayor himself had stepped in, promising an independent review of the police force. But Angela knew promises meant nothing without action. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Angela received a message. It was from an anonymous source inside the police department. "I have something you need to see. Meet me tomorrow night. Alone." Angela stared at the message. She knew this could be dangerous, but she also knew one thing. If someone was reaching out in secret, it meant they had information that could change everything. Angela sat in her car outside a quiet parking lot, waiting. The streetlights flickered above her, casting long shadows across the pavement. She checked the time on her phone. 10:57 p.m. The message she had received told her to meet at exactly 11:00 p.m. She had been in dangerous situations before, but something about this felt different. She wasn't chasing criminals or solving a case. She was exposing the truth. And truth, she knew, could make powerful enemies. A few minutes later, a dark-colored car pulled into the lot and parked a few spaces away. Angela tensed slightly but remained calm. The driver's door opened, and a man stepped out. He wore a hooded sweatshirt and kept his head low. Angela didn't recognize him. But as he got closer, She could see the nervousness in his eyes. He was scared. "You're the one who sent the message?" Angela asked. The man nodded quickly and looked around, as if making sure no one was watching. "I work in records at the police department," he said in a low voice. "I've been there for years. I've seen things." Angela stayed silent, letting him speak. He swallowed hard. "They're covering up more than just Turner's cases," he continued. "There are dozens, maybe hundreds, of complaints that were erased. People who were arrested for no reason. Officers who were protected no matter what they did." Angela's grip tightened on the file in her lap. She had suspected this, but hearing it confirmed sent a wave of frustration through her. "I found documents that prove it," the man added. "But if they find out I took them, I could lose my job, or worse." Angela could see the fear in his face, but she also saw determination. He wanted to do the right thing. "You're doing the right thing," she said firmly, "and I'll make sure you're protected." The man hesitated for a moment, then pulled a flash drive from his pocket and handed it to her. "Everything is on here," he said. "Emails, reports, deleted complaints. It's all there." Angela took the flash drive carefully. This was exactly what she needed. Proof. Not just of Turner's wrongdoing, but of an entire system that had allowed officers like him to keep abusing their power. "Be careful," the man warned. "They'll do anything to keep this hidden." Angela nodded. "I will." With that, the man quickly turned and walked back to his car. Moments later, he was gone, leaving Angela alone in the parking lot, holding the flash drive that could change everything. She drove straight to Agent Reynolds' office. Even though it was late, she knew he'd still be awake. When she arrived, Reynolds was already waiting for her, a cup of coffee in his hand. "What did you find?" he asked. Angela handed him the flash drive. "This," she said, "everything we need." Reynolds plugged it into his laptop and started scrolling through the files. His eyes widened as he read. "This is huge," he muttered. "This isn't just corruption. This is a cover-up at the highest levels." Angela took a deep breath. She had known this would be big, but now she realized just how deep it went. "We need to go public," she said. "The world needs to see this." Reynolds looked at her, then nodded. "Let's do it." The next morning, Angela and Reynolds met with Lawyer Daniels and a team of journalists. They handed over the evidence, knowing that once the truth was out, there would be no turning back. Within hours, news stations were breaking the story. Headlines flashed across screens. "Exposed. Police Department cover-up revealed." The internet exploded. People were furious. The mayor called for an emergency investigation, and inside the police department, chaos erupted. Angela had started something unstoppable. The news spread like wildfire. Every major TV channel, newspaper, and social media platform was talking about it. The leaked documents proved what many had feared. The police department had been hiding complaints, protecting officers, and allowing corruption to grow unchecked. Angela watched the news reports from her office. The evidence had finally reached the public, and now, the people in power had no choice but to respond. The mayor held a press conference, looking serious as he faced the cameras. "We are deeply disturbed by these reports," he said. "I have ordered an immediate and independent investigation into the police department. Every officer involved in covering up complaints will be held accountable." But Angela knew words were easy. She had seen too many cases where people made promises and then did nothing. She needed to make sure real action was taken. Her phone buzzed. It was Agent Reynolds. "You need to come to the office," he said. "Now." Angela didn't waste a second. When she arrived, Reynolds was sitting at his desk, his face tense. He turned his laptop screen toward her. "Turner just spoke out," he said. Angela leaned in and saw a live interview playing. Officer Turner sat across from a reporter, looking nervous but determined. "I was wrong," Turner said, his voice shaking. "I made assumptions about Agent Carter that were unfair. And I am not the only one. There are people in the department who have been doing this for years. I can't stay silent anymore." Angela raised an eyebrow. "He's confessing." Reynolds nodded. "And not just that. He's naming names." On the screen, Turner continued, "There were times when I saw officers treat people unfairly, and I stayed quiet. I followed orders. But now I realize I was part of the problem. The system protects officers even when they do wrong. I know because it protected me." Angela couldn't believe what she was hearing. She had expected Turner to stay silent, maybe even deny everything. But instead, he was exposing the truth. "Why is he doing this?" she asked. Reynolds sighed. Maybe the pressure got to him. Maybe he realized the truth would come out with or without him. Or maybe he just wants a second chance. Angela watched as Turner continued, "I won't ask for forgiveness. I just want to tell the truth now, and I'm ready to face whatever comes next." The interview ended, and Angela sat back in her chair thinking. Turner's confession would make things move even faster. The department couldn't ignore the problem anymore. That evening, the police chief announced that multiple officers were being suspended and investigated. Some high-ranking officials even resigned before they could be fired. It was the biggest scandal the department had ever faced. Angela knew this was a victory, but the fight wasn't over yet. Real change didn't happen overnight. Laws had to be changed. New policies needed to be put in place, and she wasn't going to stop until that happened. The next morning, she walked into a meeting with the city officials, community leaders, and legal experts. "This isn't just about firing bad cops," she said firmly. "We need new rules. We need real oversight. And we need to make sure this never happens again." The battle was far from over, but Angela was ready. She had started this fight, and she was going to see it through to the end. Weeks passed, but the impact of Angela's fight only grew stronger. The investigation into the police department was in full motion, and every day more details of corruption were being uncovered. Officers who had ignored complaints, erased evidence, or protected wrongdoing were being exposed. Some were fired. Others faced legal action. Angela watched as real change finally began to take shape. But she knew that justice wasn't just about punishing the guilty. It was about making sure this never happened again. She worked with legal experts and community leaders to push for new laws that would bring better oversight to the police force. The city council held emergency meetings, and after weeks of debate, they finally announced new policies. From now on, every complaint against an officer would be handled by an independent review board, not just the police department itself. Body cameras would be required at all times, and officers who had repeated complaints against them would no longer be protected. Angela sat in the audience as the mayor made the official announcement. She had fought hard for this moment, and now it was finally happening. After the press conference, a woman approached Angela. She looked nervous but determined. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said. "My son was arrested unfairly last year. We filed a complaint, but nothing ever happened. I thought no one would ever listen. But because of you, things are changing." Angela smiled, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. "This isn't just because of me," she said. "It's because of people like you who spoke out. And we're not done yet." As the weeks passed, more officers started coming forward, just like Turner had. Some admitted to turning a blind eye. Others shared stories of being pressured to protect their fellow officers, even when they knew it was wrong. The truth was coming out, piece by piece. One evening, Angela sat in her office, reflecting on everything that had happened. She had started this fight because of what happened to her. But now, it was so much bigger than that. It wasn't just about her wrongful arrest. It was about fixing the system that had failed too many people. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Agent Reynolds. "We did it. Real change is happening." Angela smiled. Yes, change was happening. But she also knew that the fight for justice never truly ended. There would always be challenges, always be people trying to push back against progress. But she was ready. because no matter how hard it got, she would always stand for what was right. And she knew she wasn't alone. The fight for justice would continue, and this time, the whole world was watching.